The storm was supposed to break by midnight. It didn't. Cristina Alvarez sat hunched on a wooden porch chair in the garden house, 8 months pregnant, clutching a blanket so thin she could see her breath through it. Rain hammered the roof above her head, wind rattled the windows, and through those windows, across the pristine lawn of the estate, she could see straight into the master bedroom. Her bedroom. Her husband was in there. James wasn't alone, though. He had his arm wrapped around Valerie, a woman who wore Cristina's stolen jewelry like trophies. Valerie lounged in the bed Cristina had been forced out of just 3 hours ago, wearing a silk nightgown that cost more than most people's rent. James was feeding her grapes. Feeding her like she was royalty, like Cristina didn't exist. Cristina's hands trembled as she adjusted the blanket around her swollen belly. She wanted to go inside, wanted to demand her dignity back, wanted to remind James that she was his wife carrying his child. But exhaustion had stolen her fight. All she could do was sit there in the cold and watch her marriage rot in the warmth of a home she was no longer welcome in. James had thrown her maternity pillows into the rain that afternoon. He said Valerie needed the master suite because a woman of her caliber deserves comfort. He said Cristina could sleep in the guest garden house until she learned some gratitude. Gratitude? For what? For watching another woman take over her life? The mansion was supposed to be a dream. Cristina had married James 4 years ago, back when he was a humble middle manager who brought her flowers from the grocery store and called her beautiful even when she wore sweatpants. She'd fallen in love with his laugh, his ambition, his promises of forever. What she never told him was that the estate he thought they'd worked so hard for wasn't his. It was hers. Every brick, every chandelier, every blade of grass on that perfectly manicured lawn. Hers. She'd inherited it all from her father, a billionaire who'd built a Sterling Alvarez corporation from nothing and left it entirely to his daughter through a secret trust. Cristina had hidden the truth from James on purpose. She wanted to be loved for who she was, not what she owned. She wanted a man who'd choose her even if she had nothing. For years, she thought she'd found that man. She was wrong. 6 months ago, James got promoted to senior director. He didn't know the promotion came from Cristina's anonymous board. He didn't know Chairperson A, who signed his paperwork, was the same woman who made him coffee every morning. The promotion went straight to his head. Suddenly, grocery store flowers weren't good enough. Sweatpants weren't good enough. Cristina wasn't good enough. He started staying late at work, started mentioning Valerie's name more often, started looking at Cristina like she was a burden instead of a blessing. And now, here she was, locked out of her own home, pregnant, cold, alone, watching her husband celebrate his betrayal like it was some kind of victory. Through the window, Valerie laughed at something James said. The sound carried across the yard, sharp and cruel. Cristina closed her eyes and felt her baby kick, hard, like even the child knew something was deeply wrong. She placed both hands on her belly and whispered, "I'm so sorry, little one. I thought I was protecting us. I thought if I waited long enough, he'd remember who we are." But he didn't remember. He'd forgotten. Or maybe he never really knew. If you think a man who forces his 8 months pregnant wife to sleep outside in a storm while his mistress takes her bed deserves what's coming to him, hit that subscribe button right now. The rain came down harder. Cristina pulled the blanket tighter and made a decision. She was done waiting, done testing, done pretending that love could survive in a man who'd chosen cruelty. Tomorrow, things would change. Tomorrow, James Alvarez would learn that the woman he threw away owned everything he thought was his. The estate, the corporation, his job, his future. She controlled it all, and he was about to find out. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the garden house in harsh white light. For just a moment, Cristina looked less like a victim and more like something dangerous, something waiting. The lock clicked at exactly 9:47 p.m. Cristina heard it from where she stood on the front porch, her hand still raised to knock. She'd gone to the main house to ask for another blanket, just one more blanket because the garden house heater had stopped working and the temperature was dropping fast. That was all she wanted. James opened the door just wide enough for her to see his face. His expression was blank, empty. like he was looking at a stranger asking for directions instead of his pregnant wife asking for basic warmth. Go back to the garden house, Christina. His voice was flat, final. But James, the heater's broken and I'm freezing. The baby... You should have thought about that before you embarrassed me in front of Valerie. She stared at him. I didn't embarrass you. I asked if I could sleep in the guest room upstairs since she took our bed. That's not our bed? He laughed. Actually laughed. Valerie is my future. You're just a mistake I'm stuck with until the divorce is finalized. The words hit like a slap. Christina's hand instinctively moved to her belly, protective, shielding her child from the cruelty in his voice. We're not getting divorced. We're having a baby. That's your problem, not mine. He started to close the door, but Christina pushed forward, desperate now. Please, James, just let me get a blanket from the linen closet. That's all I need. He looked at her for a long moment, and for just a second, she thought she saw something flicker in his eyes. Regret, maybe. Guilt. But then Valerie's voice floated down from the balcony above, sickly sweet and dripping with satisfaction. Baby, is she still here? You promised me we'd have privacy tonight. Valerie stood at the railing in a white silk robe that Christina recognized immediately. It was the robe Christina's mother had given her on her wedding day, embroidered with tiny silver stars. Valerie wore it like it was hers, like everything in this house was hers. James looked up at Valerie and his face transformed. The coldness melted into something warm, something tender, something he used to give Christina a lifetime ago. She's leaving, he called up to her. Then he turned back to Christina and the warmth vanished. You heard her. We want privacy. This is my... Christina stopped herself. She'd almost said it, almost told him the truth, that this was her house, her estate, her empire. But something held her back. Maybe it was the baby kicking again. Maybe it was the last thread of hope that he'd come to his senses. Maybe it was the part of her that still wanted him to choose her without knowing what she owned. He didn't wait for her to finish. The door slammed shut, the lock clicked, and Christina stood there in the rain, water soaking through her thin cardigan, staring at the carved mahogany door her father had imported from Italy, the door to her own home. She turned and walked back to the garden house, each step heavier than the last. Behind her, she heard laughter from the balcony. Valerie's laughter, high and victorious, the kind of laugh that comes from someone who thinks they've won. The garden house smelled like mildew and old wood. Christina wrapped herself in the single blanket and sat on the creaky porch chair, watching the main house glow warm and golden in the distance. Her father would have been horrified. Miguel Alvarez had built the Sterling Alvarez Corporation from nothing, turning a single hotel into a global empire of luxury resorts and commercial real estate. He'd been a hard man, demanding and exacting, but he loved his daughter with a fierceness that terrified anyone who tried to hurt her. She remembered the day she told him about James. They'd been in his study, surrounded by leather-bound books and the smell of expensive cigars. Her father had looked up from his paperwork, his reading glasses perched on his nose, and asked her one question. Does he have a soul, mija? She'd laughed at the time, thought it was one of his dramatic pronouncements. Of course he does, papa. No. Her father set down his pen and looked at her with those dark eyes that could see through anyone's lies. I didn't ask if he has a soul. I asked if he has a pre-existing soul. Can he love you when there's nothing in it for him? Can he be kind when kindness costs him something? Can he choose you when the world offers him something easier? Christina had been 26 then, young and certain that love conquered all. He loves me, papa. I know he does. Her father had been quiet for a long time, staring at her with an expression that looked like grief. Finally, he nodded. Then I'll put everything in a trust. You'll inherit it all when I'm gone, but James won't know. If he truly loves you, he'll stay. If he doesn't, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Miguel Alvarez died 2 years later from a heart attack. The lawyers had come to her with documents she could barely read through her tears. The Sterling Alvarez Trust. $50 billion in assets. Real estate across 6 continents. The mansion, the corporation, everything. All hers. All hidden under layers of legal protection that James would never penetrate. She'd thought about telling him. Almost did several times. But then she remembered her father's question. Pre-existing soul. And she decided to wait. To test him. to see if he could love her without knowing what she was worth. She'd been testing him for 3 years now. He'd failed. Thunder cracked overhead, and Cristina flinched. The baby rolled inside her, uncomfortable, unhappy. She whispered to her belly, "I know, little one, I know. Mama's gonna fix this, I promise." But even as she said it, she wondered if she'd waited too long, if her need to be loved for herself had blinded her to the monster her husband had become. Morning came gray and cold. Cristina woke with her neck stiff and her back screaming from the wooden chair. She hadn't slept, not really, just dozed in and out, jerking awake every time the wind hit the garden house too hard. She needed water, food, a bathroom, all things that required going back to the main house, all things that required facing James and Valerie. She stood slowly, her pregnant belly making every movement awkward and painful. The blanket fell to the floor. Her clothes were still damp from last night's rain. She looked like exactly what James wanted her to look like, defeated. She walked to the main house, using the back entrance through the kitchen. Maybe she could slip in, get what she needed, and slip out before they woke up. The kitchen was her favorite room in the entire estate. She designed it herself when her father bought the property, back when she still lived here with him. French windows overlooking the gardens, marble countertops imported from Carrara, a 6-burner stove that cost more than most cars. She pushed open the door as quietly as possible. Valerie was already there. She sat at the kitchen island in a designer nightgown, scrolling through her phone, perfectly manicured nails tapping against the screen. She looked up when Cristina entered, and her face split into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, good, you're here." Valerie set down her phone. "I'm starving. Make us breakfast." Cristina stopped in the doorway. "Excuse me?" "Breakfast." Valerie spoke slowly, like she was talking to a child. "Eggs, bacon, toast. You know, the things maids make for their employers." "I'm not your maid." "You're not anything, really." Valerie examined her nails, bored. "You're just a sad little woman who used to sleep in James's bed before he realized he could do better. So yes, you're the maid now. Or you can leave. Your choice." Cristina's jaw tightened. Every instinct screamed at her to tell this woman exactly who owned this kitchen, this house, this entire estate. But she thought about the baby, about staying close, about gathering evidence. She reached into her cardigan pocket and pressed a small recording device her lawyer had given her months ago. "Just in case," he'd said. "You never know when you'll need proof." "What would you like?" Cristina's voice was steady, calm. Valerie's eyebrows rose, surprised, like she'd expected a fight and was disappointed not to get one. "Everything, and make it perfect. James likes his eggs over easy." Cristina moved to the refrigerator, pulled out eggs, bacon, fresh bread. Her hands shook slightly as she worked, but she kept her face neutral. Valerie watched her like a predator watches prey, waiting for weakness. "You know, I almost feel sorry for you," Valerie said after a while. "James told me you were so desperate to keep him that you trapped him with a pregnancy. How pathetic is that?" Cristina cracked eggs into a bowl, said nothing. "I would never do that," Valerie continued. "I have my own money, my own career. I don't need to manipulate a man into staying with me." The irony was staggering. Valerie worked in marketing at Sterling Alvarez Hotels. Her salary came directly from Cristina's corporation. Her entire career existed because Cristina allowed it to exist. "James says you're poor," Valerie added, inspecting her coffee cup for spots. "That you came from nothing and latched onto him when you started making real money." Cristina placed the bacon in the pan, watching it sizzle. "James made $60,000 a year before his promotion. After the promotion that Cristina's board gave him, he made $120,000. Comfortable, but hardly wealthy. Everything else, the cars, the clothes, the lifestyle he thought he'd earned, came from Cristina's hidden accounts." "He's going to file for divorce soon," Valerie said, her voice light, conversational. "And when he does, you'll get nothing. No house, no money, no husband. Just a baby you can't afford and a lot of regrets." Cristina flipped the eggs with more force than necessary. The recording device in her pocket was still running, capturing every word. "Oh, and James wants you out of the garden house by tomorrow," Valerie added. "We're thinking of turning it into a gym, or maybe a studio for me. I've always wanted a place to do yoga. Christina plated the food with hands that were steady now, powered by something cold and furious building in her chest. She set the plate in front of Valerie without a word. Valerie looked at it, then looked at Christina. "Aren't you going to ask me if it's okay?" No. Christina's voice was quiet, but there was steel underneath. "I already know how to cook. I don't need your approval." For just a moment, something flickered across Valerie's face. Uncertainty, maybe. Like she just realized she was playing a game she didn't fully understand. But then James walked in, and Valerie's smile returned, bright and false. "Morning, baby!" She jumped up and threw her arms around him. "Your maid made us breakfast." James looked at Christina over Valerie's shoulder. His expression was cold, dismissive. Good, maybe she's finally learning her place. Christina walked out of the kitchen without responding. Behind her, she heard them laughing. She made it to the hallway before she stopped, pressed her hand against the wall, and forced herself to breathe. The recording device was still running, still capturing, still gathering the evidence she'd need. The call came at noon. Christina was back in the garden house, trying to rest but failing, when her phone buzzed. Marcus Chen, her lawyer. Her father's lawyer before that. The only person outside the trust who knew the full truth. "Christina," his voice was tight with concern. "This needs to stop. Now." She closed her eyes. "I know. You're 8 months pregnant, sleeping in a building that doesn't even have heat while your husband parades his mistress through your house. This isn't a test anymore. This is dangerous. I just need a few more days." For what? For him to prove he's exactly as terrible as we already know he is? Marcus's voice rose. "What if something happens to the baby? What if you go into labor in that garden house with no one around?" "I'm fine." "You're not fine." He was almost shouting now. "I've known you since you were a little girl. I watched your father build everything he had so you'd be protected. He didn't do all that so you could suffer like this." Christina felt tears burn behind her eyes. "He wanted me to be loved for myself. That's all I wanted too. And now you know. James doesn't love you. He never did. So end this, please." She was about to respond when something outside the garden house window caught her attention. James was in the driveway. He was talking to a man in an expensive suit, nodding and shaking hands. The man handed James a check. James handed him something small and glittering. Christina's stomach dropped. "Marcus, I'll call you back." She hung up before he could respond and moved to the window. The man was getting into a luxury car now, and James was walking back to the house. But Christina had seen what he'd sold. Her mother's ring. The emerald ring that had been in her family for 4 generations. The ring her father had given her when she turned 18, with tears in his eyes, telling her that her mother would have wanted her to have it. The ring she'd kept in a safe in the master bedroom. The ring James had no right to touch. She watched him disappear into the house, and 30 seconds later, Valerie came running out, squealing with joy. She was holding car keys, brand new car keys. James had sold her mother's ring to buy his mistress a car. Something broke inside Christina. Not her heart. That had broken last night when he locked her out. This was something deeper. The last piece of restraint. The final thread of patience. She pulled out her phone and called Marcus back. "End it," she said when he answered. "End all of it. I want the paperwork ready by tonight." She could hear the relief in his voice. "Thank God. I'll have everything prepared. The deed, the trust documents, his termination papers. All of it," Christina repeated. "And Marcus, I want it public. Very public." "What are you thinking?" She watched Valerie jump up and down in the driveway, showing off her new car to absolutely no one. "James is throwing a party tonight. A housewarming party for Valerie. He invited his boss, his colleagues, everyone he wants to impress." "Of course he did," Marcus muttered. "Let him have his party," Christina said softly. "Let him celebrate. Let him show off the house he thinks is his. And then I want you to show up with the full board and explain to everyone exactly who owns what." There was a long pause. Then Marcus laughed. Actually laughed. "Your father would be so proud right now. I should have done this months ago." "Yes," Marcus agreed, "you should have. But you're doing it now. That's what matters. They spent the next hour on the phone, going over details, documents, timing, the exact sequence of revelations that would destroy James's world in front of everyone he wanted to impress. When they finally hung up, Christina felt something she hadn't felt in months. Power, control, clarity. She looked at the main house and thought, enjoy it while it lasts. The afternoon brought rain again, but James didn't care. He was too busy preparing for his party. Christina watched from the garden house as catering trucks arrived, as florists carried in arrangements of flowers that cost more than most people's monthly rent. She watched Valerie direct the staff like she owned the place, pointing and gesturing, demanding perfection. At 4 p.m., there was a knock on the garden house door. Christina opened it to find James standing there, dressed in an expensive suit she'd never seen before. He'd probably bought it with one of the credit cards attached to her corporate accounts. He didn't greet her, just looked her up and down with barely concealed disgust. "You look terrible." "Hello to you too, James." "We're having guests tonight, important guests. My boss is coming, along with several executives from the company." He said it like it was supposed to impress her, like she didn't know exactly who those executives were, like she hadn't approved their hiring. "Good for you." Valerie thought it would be nice to have extra help. Staff is already hired, but we need someone to oversee them. He paused, and something cruel flickered across his face. "We need a maid." Christina stared at him. "You want me to be a maid at your party? It's the least you can do. You're living here for free after all." The urge to laugh was almost overwhelming. Living here for free? In her own house, on her own property, using her own utilities. "And if I refuse," James stepped closer, his voice dropping low and threatening, "then you can leave. Tonight, in the rain, pregnant, with nowhere to go and no one to help you. Your choice." He thought he had all the power, thought he was offering her an ultimatum she couldn't refuse. He had no idea what was coming. Christina looked past him at the main house, at the lights glowing warm in every window, at the party preparations that were nearly complete. She thought about Marcus and the lawyers, about the board members who would arrive later, about the look on James's face when he realized what he'd done. "Fine," she said quietly. "I'll help." James smiled, triumphant. "Good. Be at the main house by 6. Wear something black and plain. Try not to embarrass me more than you already have." He walked away without another word, and Christina closed the door. She had 2 hours until the party started. 2 hours until the rest of her life began. She pulled out her phone and texted Marcus. "I'm ready. Bring everyone." His response came immediately. "Already on our way. Trust me, Christina. Tonight you take everything back." She pressed her hand to her belly and felt the baby kick. Strong, healthy, fighter. "Tonight, little one," she whispered. "Tonight, Mama shows them who she really is." The main house was already buzzing with activity when Christina arrived at 6. Caterers moved through the kitchen with military precision, bartenders set up stations in the grand ballroom, florists made final adjustments to massive arrangements that probably cost more than Christina's car. Except Christina didn't have a car. James had sold hers 3 months ago, claiming they needed to downsize. She had found the simple black dress in the back of a closet in the garden house. It was old, plain, exactly what James had demanded. She'd pulled her hair back into a tight bun. No makeup, no jewelry except the silver locket her father had given her. She looked exactly like what they wanted her to look like. Invisible. A woman in a uniform fading into the background of someone else's celebration. Valerie found her immediately. She swept into the kitchen in a red dress that was so tight it looked painted on. Diamonds dripped from her ears and throat. Christina's diamonds, stolen from the master bedroom safe. "Oh good, you're here." Valerie looked her up and down, smirking. "Perfect outfit. Very appropriate for your station." "What do you need me to do?" Christina kept her voice neutral, empty. "Oversee the staff. Make sure everything is perfect. James's boss is coming and this needs to be flawless." Valerie leaned in close, her perfume overwhelming. "And stay out of sight. If anyone asks who you are, you're the housekeeper, nothing more." "Understood. Good girl." Valerie patted her cheek like she was a child, then swept away in a cloud of expensive perfume and unearned confidence. Christina watched her go, then checked her phone. Marcus had texted, 20 minutes out. Board members confirmed. Trust documents ready. Detective standing by for the theft charges. Are you sure you want to go through with this? She texted back without hesitation, absolutely. The first guests started arriving at 7. Christina watched from the kitchen as they entered the grand ballroom, dressed in designer clothes, carrying expensive wine, admiring the mansion like it was some kind of museum. She recognized several of them. David Chen, the CFO of Sterling Alvarez Corporation, Miranda Torres, head of international operations, Robert Kim, senior vice president. They all worked for her, they just didn't know it yet. James stood at the entrance in his new suit, playing the gracious host, shaking hands and accepting congratulations like he'd accomplished something remarkable. Valerie clung to his arm, smiling and laughing, introducing herself as the Lady of the House. The title made Christina's teeth clench. Lady of the House. In Christina's house, wearing Christina's jewelry, standing next to Christina's husband. Not for much longer. Christina moved through the party like a ghost, checking on catering, refilling drinks, making sure everything ran smoothly. She kept her head down, her movements efficient. Nobody looked at her twice. To them, she was just staff, invisible, unimportant. At 7:45, she was carrying a tray of champagne glasses through the hallway when Valerie appeared suddenly, blocking her path. "There you are." Valerie's voice was slurred slightly. She'd already had too much to drink. "James wants you to bring more appetizers to the ballroom." "Of course." Christina moved to step around her, but Valerie didn't move. "You know what I love most about tonight?" Valerie's smile was vicious. "Watching you serve us in your own husband's house. It's poetic, really." "If you'll excuse me." Christina tried to move past, but Valerie stuck out her foot. Deliberately, maliciously. Christina saw it coming but couldn't stop her momentum, not with the tray, now with her pregnant belly throwing off her balance. She went down hard. The tray crashed to the marble floor. Crystals shattered everywhere. Champagne spread across the white marble in a golden puddle, and Christina landed on her hands and knees, the impact jarring through her entire body. Pain shot through her stomach, sharp, terrifying. "The baby." She gasped, both hands flying to her belly, checking, praying. Footsteps approached. She looked up, hoping for help, for concern, for something human. James stood there, looking down at her. For one horrible moment, their eyes met, and he laughed. Not a surprised laugh, not an uncomfortable laugh, a genuine, entertained laugh. "God, you're clumsy." He shook his head. "Clean this up before anyone important sees it." Then he walked away. Valerie stood there, smiling down at her, triumphant. "You should be more careful," she said sweetly, "in your condition." Christina stayed on the floor, surrounded by broken glass and spilled champagne, and felt something inside her die. Not hope. She'd already lost that. Not love. That was long gone. What died was mercy. Any shred of sympathy she might have had for James, any hesitation about what she was about to do, vanished in that moment. He'd laughed while his pregnant wife was on the floor. He'd walked away. He'd chosen cruelty. Now she would choose justice. She pulled herself up slowly, carefully, ignoring Valerie's continued smirking. Her hands were shaking, but not from fear. From rage, from power that had been dormant for too long. She pulled out her phone and texted Marcus, "Now. Come now." The doorbell rang at exactly 8 o'clock. Christina was back in the kitchen, having changed out of her champagne-soaked dress into another simple black one she kept in her car. She'd checked the baby. Multiple kicks, strong movement. Her triumphant smile had vanished. "James?" Her voice was small, uncertain. "What is he talking about?" But James wasn't listening to her. He was staring at Christina, and reality was crashing down around him like a building collapse. "You're lying," he said, but his voice shook. "All of you are lying. This is some kind of joke." "It's not a joke," Christina spoke for the first time, and her voice carried through the entire ballroom. Clear, strong, absolutely done with pretending. "This house belonged to my father. He left it to me. Everything you think you own, Every comfort you've enjoyed for the past 4 years came from me." She stepped forward, and the crowd parted like water. "I hid my inheritance because I wanted to be loved for myself. I wanted a husband who would choose me even if I had nothing. But you couldn't even choose me when you thought I had everything." James's face had gone from white to red. "You lied to me. You manipulated me." "I tested you." Christina's voice was ice. "And you failed spectacularly." "Miss Alvarez," Marcus said gently, "perhaps you'd like to change before we continue?" Christina looked down at her simple black dress, then back at the party, at James, who looked like he might bomb it, at Valerie, who had started to cry, at the guests, who were recording everything on their phones. "Yes," she said quietly, "I think I would." She climbed the stairs to the master bedroom for the first time in days. The room still smelled like Valerie's perfume, and it made her stomach turn. She opened the closet, pushed past Valerie's cheap clothes, and found the section in the back that James had probably never noticed. Designer gowns, real jewelry, the wardrobe of a woman who owned the $50 billion empire. She chose a midnight blue silk gown that her father had bought her for her 25th birthday. It was maternity cut, elegant, designed to emphasize her pregnancy as power rather than weakness. She changed quickly, then opened the safe that James had been raiding. The combination was her mother's birthday. James had never known. Inside were documents, deeds, stock certificates, and one very specific envelope marked, "In case of emergency." She took it all. When she walked back downstairs, the entire party had gathered in the foyer. James stood in the center, surrounded by lawyers and board members, looking smaller than she'd ever seen him. Valerie stood off to the side, mascara running down her face. Christina descended the stairs slowly, deliberately. Every eye in the room followed her. The transformation was complete. This wasn't the broken woman from the garden house. This wasn't the maid they'd ignored all evening. This was Christina Alvarez, chairperson, billionaire, mother, and she was done playing games. She stopped at the bottom of the stairs and looked at James. Really looked at him. Tried to find any remnant of the man she'd fallen in love with. Found nothing. "James Alvarez," she said clearly, "as of this moment, you are terminated from your position at Sterling Alvarez Corporation. Security will escort you from the building tomorrow morning." James' mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Furthermore," Christina continued, "you are hereby ordered to vacate this property immediately. You have 1 hour to collect your personal belongings. Anything purchased with corporate cards or from my accounts will remain here." She handed a document to Marcus, who handed it to James. "And finally, I'm filing for divorce. Full custody of our child. You'll receive the papers tomorrow." "You can't do this." James' voice was barely a whisper. "I just did." She turned to Valerie, who looked like she wanted to disappear. "Miss Valerie Ross, you're also terminated from Sterling Alvarez Hotels, effective immediately. Furthermore, every piece of jewelry you're wearing belongs to me. You'll return it now or I'll have you arrested for theft." Valerie's hands flew to her throat, to her ears. "But James gave these to me. He said he owned them. He lied." Christina held out her hand. "Now." Valerie removed the diamonds with shaking fingers and placed them in Christina's palm. The board members watched in silence. The party guests recorded everything. This would be all over social media by morning. Billionaire heiress reveals identity at husband's party. Wife forces husband out of her house. Pregnant woman owns everything. James seemed to realize the full scope of what was happening. "Wait, please, Christina, I'm sorry. I made a mistake. I didn't know." "You're not sorry you hurt me," Christina cut him off. "You're sorry you lost access to my money. There's a difference." Marcus stepped forward. "Miss Alvarez, there's one more matter." He pulled another document from his briefcase. "The secondary credit card Mr. Alvarez has been using to purchase gifts for Miss Ross is actually an extension of your corporate business account. That makes every purchase corporate embezzlement. The amount totals over $400,000. James went white. "I didn't know. You have to believe me. I didn't." "I don't have to believe anything." Christina looked at him one last time, saw the fear, the desperation, the sudden understanding of exactly what he'd lost. She felt nothing. "There are also the matters of my mother's ring, which you sold without permission," Marcus continued, "the vintage wine collection you've been selling from the cellar, the artwork you removed from storage and sold online, All thefts, all documented. A man in a police uniform stepped forward from where he'd been waiting near the door. James Alvarez, you're under arrest for theft and embezzlement. The party guests gasped, phones recorded, and James, who had been so confident just an hour ago, looked at Christina with pure terror. Please, he whispered, I'm the father of your child. My child will be better off without you. The handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists. James was led away and Valerie followed him, sobbing. The door closed behind them and the mansion fell silent. Christina stood in the foyer of her childhood home, surrounded by people who just witnessed the complete destruction of the man she'd married. She should have felt triumphant, victorious. Instead, she just felt tired. Marcus approached quietly. Are you all right? I will be. She touched her belly, felt the baby kick, strong, alive, fighting. We'll both be all right. The board members offered quiet congratulations and excused themselves. The party guests filtered out, no doubt rushing to post about what they'd witnessed. The catering staff cleaned up in respectful silence, and eventually Christina was alone. She climbed the stairs one more time, walked into the master bedroom and opened all the windows. Let the cold night air blow out Valerie's perfume. Let it clear away the memory of James's betrayal. Let it make the space hers again. She sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out her phone, opened the photo album, found the picture of her father from 5 years ago, standing in this very room, smiling at the camera. I understand now, Papa, she whispered to the photo. I understand what you were trying to teach me. She thought about his question, pre-existing soul. James never had one. Maybe he never could have. Maybe some people were only capable of loving what you could give them, never who you actually were. But her baby would be different. Her child would grow up knowing love without conditions, would grow up understanding that real power wasn't in wealth or status or control over others. Real power was in knowing your worth and never, ever letting anyone make you forget it. Rain started falling outside, soft, gentle, nothing like the storm from last night. Christina lay back on the bed and placed both hands on her belly. It's just you and me now, little one, she said softly. You and me and an empire to run. Your grandfather built it for us. Your father tried to take it. But we're still here. We survived. The baby kicked, hard, like agreement, like a promise, like a fighter who never learned how to quit. Christina smiled for the first time in days. Tomorrow, she'd file the divorce papers. Tomorrow, she'd meet with the board and reclaim her position publicly. Tomorrow, she'd start the process of transforming this estate from a place of pain into a sanctuary for her child. But tonight, she'd rest. Tonight, she'd remember what her father told her before he died. Strength isn't about never falling, mija. It's about getting back up. It's about knowing when to walk away and when to fight back. And it's about never, ever letting anyone convince you that you're less than you are. Christina had fallen. She'd stayed down too long, let the test go on too far. But she'd gotten back up. And in the process, she'd learned exactly who she was. Not James's wife, not a victim, not someone who needed permission to exist in her own home. She was Christina Alvarez, daughter of Miguel, heir to an empire, mother of the next generation, and she was done apologizing for taking up space. The rain continued outside. The house settled around her, familiar and safe again. And somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled. Not a threat this time, a promise, a new beginning, a story that was only just starting. If you're standing with Christina and against men like James who abuse and manipulate, subscribe now and comment never again to show that we don't tolerate this kind of treatment. Let James know the whole world saw what he did and we're not on his side. Thank you for watching. See you on the next one.